Dr. Joanne Stroud is a founding fellow of the Dallas Institute of Humanities and Culture. She's director of Institute Publications and editor of the Gaston Bachelard Translation Series, which consists of 7 works on elemental imagination written by the French 20th century philosopher of science. She is a prolific writer. She is the author of The Bonding of Will and Desire, the 4-volume series Choose Your Element, and Time Doesn't Tick Anymore, Gaston Bachelard, an elemental review on the world's stuff, and Towers Too Tall. In 2017, this year, the University of Dallas honored her with the Distinguished Alumni Award for sustained distinguished accomplishment and contribution. We know she is a woman of distinction, a scholar and a true lover of this city and a lover of the work, and so it gives me great pleasure to introduce to you now Dr. Joanne Stroud.
When I saw this film that we showed earlier, I thought, I've always known that James Hillman was prescient, that he could see things ahead of time, that he was way ahead of time. But I didn't realize that he knew what I was going to write my paper about 12 years ago. Because I've been thinking about the triangle of Aphrodite, Ares, and Hephaestus for many long years. In fact, I remember talking years ago about it with Gail, and she really gave the title to this play. She said, well, it's a really tight triangle. And I said, yes, and I've been thinking about it ever since. I mean, I've been connected with Aphrodite a lot. And because I always admired her figure that somehow connected heaven and earth. Because she's a goddess, she knows the heavenly realm, but she also brings the world alive to us. And I think in our kind of, I guess you call it intellectually, the post-Cartesian world, that we don't have enough love of the world as it is. This is not materiality, but knowing and taking the time to enjoy the sounds, the textures, the colors. And so the world of Aphrodite has always interested me. So I wanted to see just what is this connection between the love of war, between Aphrodite and Mars. And so I dive into James, to this volume, but I look back at the chapter that's in this volume was really written, was part of a book called that had a series of different essays called Apocalypse. And today, when we are looking at images of apocalypse that hover, perhaps we've grown skeptical about getting involved in wars. But James urges us in this strange way that to enter the attraction in order to understand the power of the god Mars. And he says, unless we enter into the martial art, the state of soul, we cannot comprehend its pull. Continuing, he explains that only by fully entering this arena imaginatively can we deal with it, because it's a principle of psychological method that any phenomena to be understood must be emphatically imagined. To know war, we must enter its love. No psychic phenomena can be truly dislodged from its fixity unless we first move imagination into its heart. That is very difficult. When all about us, we see the world being torn apart by conflict. I have to say that I think that Aphrodite's presence is ever so more necessary. Every single morning of my life that I get up and see beauty around me, I think of those people in Syria who have to look at their cities and see them totally destroyed, and the despair that one must feel. And so it makes me think that it's doubly important that every hour, every day, we find the beauty in our lives. But in this volume, in Mythic Figures, in the chapter called Wars, Arms, Rams, Mars, he expresses how dear this subject was to him, the terrible love of war. He says, the love of war, the love in any war and for war, that is more than my life. Actually, this is what Patton says in the film that Margot was talking about, that it's helped by God on a battlefield, a devastated piece of earth that is made sacred by that devastation. What provokes this intense love that calls up the God? The my life refers in the scene from the film Patton, when the Third Army general, walking across a devastated field, says to a dying soldier, I love it, God help me, I do love it so, I love it more than my life. How irrational does that seem? That a call to arms can be a thrill as well as a chilling prospect. So let me repeat, to know war, we must enter its love. No psychic phenomena can be truly dislodged from its fixity unless we first move imagination into its heart. So that's what I'm going to try to do here. In attempting to enter the imagination of the love of war, we can recall that the stories of war dominate our history books and have been turning points in Western civilization. We've been taught history depends upon battle, whose outcome in terms depends upon an invisible genius who is a leader or a hero through whom transcendent spirits are manifested. So even in peace times, we've had military statues of military heroes. And of course, recently we have seen that they have been very symbolic. The Confederate statues that have aroused visions of slavery that are very, very uncomfortable. And these are drawing a lot of attention, and one can understand why. But we also have in our education the primary books that we've studied, like the Iliad, the Odyssey, the Bhagavad Gita, the Celtic Labor Gahala, and the Norse Eddas, all entail battles. So Jim speaks of how mystifying it is to connect the reality of the actual day on the battlefield with the reports of the uplift that soldiers express. The onrush of going into battle, the lightheartedness in killing, even in a cause that many care very little about. The altered state of perception, the intensified vitality, a new awareness of beauty, and a nearness of divinity. Their little plot, their meager, grimy life, suddenly transcendently sweet. How can that be? James follows with this quixotic quote with the same observation that Confederate General Robert E. Lee said, "It is well that war is so terrible, we would grow too fond of it." So war is always strangely ambiguous. stirringly patriotic on the grand scale and frightening in the pit of the stomach. Now, James does remind us that war does have its beautiful aspects, its military rituals, the formations, the parades, the costumes, all of those, the shields, the blades, everything. And Edith Hamilton makes this acute distinction. She said, between Greece and Rome, the Romans liked Mars better than the Greeks liked Ares. James points out, our American consciousness has extreme difficulty with Mars, but the repression of the warlord brings forth violence, even in opposition to war. When we do get drawn in, we enact the blind god's blindness and resort to overkill as a way to end war. James draws a clearer picture. He says, unlike the Roman Republic, where Jupiter and Mars could rule together, our republic pretends to have no god of war, or even a department of war. The repression, rather than the ritualization of Mars, leaves us exposed to the return of the repressed, as rude, eruptive violence, as indulgent military expenditures, as rigid reactions, formations disguised as peace negotiations, and as paranoid defenses against delusional enemies. Hillman believes, by the way, that nuclear war is not under the guise of Mars. You have to. It isn't. He said it's a very complicated argument. And maybe some of you can shed more light on it, but he thinks it's much more in the area of apocalypse and the tradition of transcendence, or an apocalypse. Because it doesn't, see, Mars does have its beauty aspects, and nuclear war does not. Now, James supports the theme that I'm putting forth today of the triangular that we're talking about here. He's adamant that the gods do not operate as singularities. I mean, we think of them as some beautiful statue of Poseidon or Zeus with a thunderbolt. But he says, never, believe me, never did the gods appear alone. I'm inviting you this afternoon to enter into this image of Aphrodite, Mars, and Hephaestus as we're exploring archetypally the dynamics of this tight triangle. Aphrodite, as you remember, is married to Hephaestus, but she has a continuous love affair with Ares. In the book 5 of the Odyssey, Homer tells the story of this adulterous affair of these two that Helios, the sun who sees all, reveals to Hephaestus. So, thinking that her husband is away, Aphrodite and Ares are caught in the act. They're trapped together in a bed with these ingenious golden chains that are attached to the bedposts. And so there they are, caught in the act, and all the male gods come and laugh at this dilemma, but not the female goddesses, apparently. So now, Aphrodite, let's explore her nature a little bit more. She seems very ill-matched for the club-footed, lame, baggy-legged god of the anvil and the furnace, and she spends zero time with him. Carl Karenyi says, goddesses who have their well-defined meaning and function will not tolerate husbands beside them. I don't know what that means in this. But it maybe give you pause to think of. I've had two husbands. The, the character of Hephaestus is not nearly so well developed as are many of the other Olympians when you think of Apollo, Athena, Artemis, or Dionysius. Some accounts say that Zeus picked Hephaestus for Aphrodite's husband, but that seems like asking for trouble. Yeats, in a different vein, in his A Prayer for My Daughter, attributes the choice to Aphrodite herself. He said, while that great queen that rose out of the spray, being fatherless, could have her way, yet chose a baggy-legged smith for man. Carini describes Aphrodite this way: it is the warmth and truth of passion that shines through Aphrodite's nature, as sunlight gold shines through her whole appearance. She who loves earthly textures, colors, scents, the livest growing things, is oddly paired with either the god of the hearth or the war god as well. Ares is more of a divine swashbuckler than a fully described personality. He is mentioned favorably in the Homeric hymn to Ares for his courage, giving courage in difficult situations. But he was hated by all, even his father Zeus, who says of all the gods that he scorns only Eris for being a stirrer of strife. And in another place, Zeus says, in a backhanded slap at her, that Ares takes after Hera, his mother. She conceived him in anger for ignoring her, his lawful wife, and conceived Athena by drawing her out of his head. Interestingly, the only association that Athena and Aphrodite have, Aphrodite, of course, is often called by the other gods when they need someone to stir up passion. But as she is in the Iliad, when Hera goes to her and asks for a girdle to seduce Zeus and keep him out of the battlefield. The only time that Athena and Aphrodite have anything in common is that they are at times attended by Pytho, the persuader. So both of them have the powers of persuasion. Now, there does seem to be this close relationship between love and war. Think of the expressions we bandy about, like all's fair in love and war, or make love, not war, or Yeats' tribute to the participants in the Irish Rebellion in the repeating refrain from Easter 1916. The struggle, the killing, the dying for a noble cause evokes this assertion: a terrible beauty is born. The connection between Ares, Hephaestus, and the promiscuous Aphrodite is also highlighted by Homer in the book 18 in the Iliad, where Homer, in lengthy details, describes the story of Achilles' mother, Thetis, pleasing with Hephaestus to forge a new shield for her son. So, and then from that, there is also W.H. Auden, who, in remembrance of this event, wrote an anti-war poem called The Shield of Achilles, that enumerates the costs of battles and in the lives of gods and mortals. In the final stanza, Auden describes Hephaestus as the thin-lipped armorer who hobbled away. If you'll remember the Shield of Achilles, it had two cities, the city in peace, and this where there's dancing, and the city of a war in which there's total devastation. So I had to go and, because in this volume, as in with many of the Olympian gods and goddesses, we hear much more about their pathologies than about their, shall we say, heroic qualities. So we have to go to the thought of the heart to read Hillman's positive view of Aphrodite, her endearing qualities of revealing Earth's sensuous beauty. He says that she, in the chapter Pink Madness, or Why Does Aphrodite Drive Men Crazy with Pornography, is talking about the repression of Aphrodite in our culture, and also the repression that drives us towards super consumerism. So those are two very big subjects that I really don't have time to get into, but are very, very revealing. Thomas Moore has this to say: we live in a world that has adopted anti-Venusian values to live by and fails to see the virtue in simple bodily pleasure. I truly believe that the cultural decision in the West, centuries ago, to dissociate from all Venusian values in favor of an unnecessarily Spartan spirituality was a devastating development for the spiritual lives of millions. It falsely separated body from spirit, thereby leaving no place for soul. Tom also, in the same essay, says that in ancient tradition, Venus is said to calm the warlike anger of Mars. Hillman says very much the same thing in one of the questions. If you get the tape and hear some of the questions from the film we saw. Now here I want to introduce you, if you don't know him yet, Gaston Bachelard. How many in this room have read anything of Bachelard? Good. David Miller and I will certainly be happy, and James Hillman would be, because he constantly quotes Bachelard. And in the next to last chapter, he talks about how Bachelard schooled him. So I wanted to talk to you because my premise is that what binds the three figures together is their attraction to elemental fire, all three. Now, all of us are attracted to all of the four elements, but all of us have a dominant one. And in their case, Hephaestus is the god of fire. Aphrodite is the one that flames out, that brings out all the sensuous qualities. And Ares is also the god of war. So these three are attended primarily by this image of fire. And Bachelard, as you know, wrote many books on the four elements, but he emphasizes the link between fire and passion, making fire the first phenomena to which the mind reflected. He says, among all phenomena, fire alone is sufficiently prized by prehistoric man to awaken him the desire for knowledge, and this mainly because it accompanies the desire for love. Following this line of association, he says, sexualized fire is the connective link for all symbols. So, since we have Hephaestus as the fire god, and the fire, and Bachelard says fire, the image of fire, and the fire is it animates everything. Fire is involved in all things that change. It's the seed, the spark, and fire can be the objective phenomena of an inner rage or a hand that becomes irritable. One of the which the first book was the Psychoanalysis of Fire that he wrote in 1938, and he was very much influenced. Psychoanalysis was from Freud, but before he finished, he had really become much more of a follower of Jung. And he had talked about two complexes, several more, but the Prometheus one, which wishing to do what its parents do, the child steals some matches. And then also Bachelard talks about the Empedocles complex, in which are united the love and the respect for fire, the instinct of living, and the instinct for dying. Love, death, and fire united in the same moment. Now, doesn't this sound like Ares, Aphrodite, and Hephaestus?